Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a pool of oddly yellow liquid that medieval doctors thought could cure just about anything. Urine. Yes, if you thought healing potions were bizarre, just wait until you hear what our ancestors were brewing up in their dirty little jars. We're about to embark on a journey through the absurd, the unsanitary and the downright ridiculous world of Tudor medicine, where every ailment could apparently be solved with a splash of the golden nectar. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the unsanitary delights I serve up here. And hey, don't forget to comment below on your most unusual home remedy. Now, dim those lights, switch on a gentle fan to mimic the fresh air of a medieval village, and settle in like a knight ready for battle. Except this time, you're battling the horrors of the past. Let's ponder for a moment. Have you ever considered what it'd be like to visit a doctor in the 1500s? Would you trust someone who prescribed you a potion made from plants, poop, and possibly pee? Would you take a chance on a leech therapy session? How did people even keep track of their health when parchment was too valuable to use as toilet paper? And here's a fun fact. Lizzie from down the road claims her flu was cured by the neighbour's cat sitting on her forehead. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Tudor England, where every sneeze might be followed by a doctor's visit that's more like a questionable performance art piece. Good luck. Welcome to the Tudor age, where gold wasn't just coveted for its shine, it was celebrated in liquid form. People were willing to try anything that shimmered, and urine topped the list. Picture this. A time when the most celebrated remedy was a concoction brewed directly from one's bladder. Talk about taking a leap of faith. In this era of curious remedies, it wasn't uncommon to see people scuttling about in search of their next health tonic, all while cringing at the thought of what they might have to drink. Doctors of the time, often more suited to performing surgical theatre on a foggy Tuesday than actual healing, would proclaim the virtues of urine with a gusto typically reserved for fireworks displays. It's a natural detoxifier, they'd yell, as if waving a magic wand while holding a jug of yellow liquid like it was the Holy Grail. Imagine walking into a Tudor physician's office, where the waiting room smells suspiciously like a barn after a rainstorm, and getting told that your ailment could be cured by a concoction featuring, you guessed it, someone else's pee. Sounds like the world's worst escape room, right? Now, let's talk about the little quirks of urine diagnostics and treatments that made the Tudor era quite the bizarre historical rollercoaster. The system of diagnosis was far from scientific. Doctors would observe your urine's colour, consistency, and fragrance like sommelier critiquing cheap wine. Ah, yes, you have a hint of asparagus with a touch of desperation. If you were unlucky enough to suffer from jaundice, your pee would take on a delightful shade of lemon, something that even a cheerful Tudor would chuckle at, realising they'd placed their trust in a bottle that looked like it belonged to a painter, working with yellows and greens from the palette of a blind artist. You might wonder, how did they even come to think urine was healing? Well, they credited humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, with guiding their medical opinions. If you had a serious case of feeling bleh, that could only mean your humour wasn't balanced, and it was time for a urine-based elbow grease cocktail. Simply finding the right blend would become the quest of many an ailing citizen. What harm could a little golden nectar do, they'd say, blissfully ignorant that they were willingly participating in what might be the strangest active social experiment in history. Ah, treatment time. Our wayfaring patients often receive concoctions involving their own urine, then chucked in a dash of herbs, your regular chamber pot casserole. Imagine being offered a warm mug of that delightful blend after your morning tea. No wonder the phrase, better out than in, took on a whole new meaning. As if that weren't outrageous enough, various hepatic herbs, mysterious forest fungi, and sketchy sauces were included, all purportedly to help cleanse the body of nasty humours, including of course, the spirit of regret. You had to wonder if Tudor folk ever sat around the hearth singing "What a Friend We Have in Pee." Their creativity knew no bounds. Personally, I can't imagine getting desperate enough to dive into the medical discounts of urine. It's like being offered a free sample of a suspicious-looking juice at the supermarket, the kind where you wonder who's actually shopping there. And don't for a second think this was just a peasant thing. Lords and ladies embraced this golden beverage too, though their sources were notably more refined. Yes, the wealthier classes mingled over their liquid gold as socially as they'd converse over imported spices, which were just as hard to come by. After all, if you were going to consume someone's golden output, it better be from a reputable bladder, right? The standard of high-quality urine was always a hot topic in the noble circles. The absurdity of it all begs the question: how did the urine boom fizzle out? With the scientific revolution breathing down their necks, along with the discovery of germs and the necessity for actual hygiene, doctors eventually wrestled away the reins from their pee-obsessed predecessors. Yes, amidst the filth and intrigue of Tudor England, while people once turned to the dance of urine and plants, the increasingly soiled reputation of urine treatment soon stank up the entire industry. So here we are, reflecting on the Tudor medical marvels that might make you think twice before slapping any liquid on a wound. Urine might have been liquid gold, while today's understanding of medicine gleams far brighter, if for the simple fact that we've cruelly distanced ourselves from the bodily and beverage-based absurdities of the past. And while your toilet may not be the fountain of youth, at least you can take solace in letting those long-ago fad remedies linger only in history's rearview mirror. Imagine walking into a doctor's office that looks less like a clinic and more like a medieval sorcerer's hoard. Instead of files of potions, you're greeted by jars filled with someone else's urine, all while the doctor scribbles your name on a faintly damp parchment. Welcome to the world of Tudor medicine, where trust was scarce and diagnosis often questionable. Here, every ailment could be evaluated by a quick glance at the contents of a glass container that had definitely seen better days. The medics were often merely glorified fortune-tellers, claiming to diagnose your ills by the colour, clarity, and aroma of your liquid gold. So, what exactly are they looking for? If your sample resembled a sunset, congratulations, you were probably suffering from fever, a cloudy concoction. You were definitely dealing with a distempered condition, whatever that meant. They didn't need to ask about symptoms, the sample did all the talking. It's like attending a modern-day restaurant where the waitstaff merely assessed the cleanliness of your shoes before whisking you away to the menu du jour. What an experience. And of course, treatment often just meant drinking more of that golden nectar. Nothing says healing like more pee. But wait, there's more. Urine was believed to also be a cure-all for balding and were-tigers, and rubbing it into your scalp was a practice as common as morning coffee today. Ever had a bad hair day? Tudor folks would just ditch hair gel for what they believed to be a spa in a bottle. At least they weren't blowing cash at salons. They were just a little more yellow. The establishments where these doctors practiced were known as lechers or piss shops, and quite frankly, the name said it all. Picture wood-panelled walls adorned with strangely cheerful paintings of happy, healthy peasant folk. In the back, however, you'd find jars collecting every last drop of liquid inputs, which probably looked like a twisted art exhibit titled The Many Shades of Health. It's somewhat comforting to know that they didn't need a modern lab coat or a name tag. Their charming, comically medieval vibe is still intact centuries later. But let's not forget that Tudor doctors didn't just dabble in urine therapy. Oh no, they were skilled in various medieval medical arts. Bloodletting? Come on down. Nothing says I care like draining your patient's life essence through an open wound. They'd use leeches if they wanted to be gentle, of course, gentle by Tudor standards, or slice the skin using what could best be described as rusty cutlery. It was like a disturbing reality series. Who wants to lose a pint today? This blend of procedures could send patients on an unpredictable health adventure. Imagine you woke up with what felt like simply a sniffle. Next, you'd find yourself drained, dizzy, and possibly deceased. That being said, medical knowledge did have some grounding in observation. They believed that humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, needed to be balanced. Kind of like an ancient version of a monthly budget, but infinitely more dangerous. Medics often doubled as dentists, which is horrifying given what we now know about dental hygiene. Ever had a sore tooth? Don't worry, a leech or a tiny who knows what could cure your problem. You'd sit there wondering if losing a few molars was more painful than watching this madcap treatment unfold. Now imagine a moment for yourself while reclining on a stool in this unusual establishment of the past. The decor may leave one feeling dizzy, but looking around at the jars, the half-opened books, and the serious priests comprising your medical team begins to feel oddly comforting. The only thing missing? Perhaps some flasks of essential oils for a bit of aromatherapy. In conclusion, walking away from a Tudor doctor's office felt like a paradox of uncertainty and confused relief. Trinkets, jugs filled with miracle fluid, and conversations dripping with questionable knowledge were the audio-visual experience of a patient's journey into wellness. As the world of medicine evolved and knowledge poured in like a warming morning sun, these peculiar practices would soon get phased out, but the laughter, ever-present illumination, and resilience of the human spirit would shine through. If you managed to laugh your way through visits to the lecher's lair and survived your tendency to pee fearlessly, consider yourself a true Tudor miracle. Urine was like the Swiss army knife of Tudor remedies, versatile and oh so misunderstood. Mixed with herbs like rosemary and peppermint, it was considered a miracle cure for everything from sore throats to suspected witchcraft. You'd think they'd put that recipe on a postcard, but then again, wish you were here pea included doesn't have quite the same ring, does it? Imagine a Tudor herbalist meticulously measuring out ingredients as if mixing a delightful cocktail rather than concocting a potion from yesterday's pee. This was the odd truth of Tudor therapy, where your average health potion had more variation than your favourite juice bar's menu. So what really went into these bubbling cauldrons? Well, once you extracted the golden liquid in a chamber pot, it was mixed thoroughly with herbs that either smelled lovely or made you gag, sometimes both. Picture this, a crowded Tudor kitchen, where the warm scent of rosemary mingled mysteriously with an unmistakable odour of human history. You could practically taste the desperation as families clung tightly to their urine remedies, convinced that today's pea cocktail had the power to transform them from bedridden souls to sprightly birds in no time at all. Why bother seeing a proper doctor when urine and a handful of herbs could cure your cough, and perhaps even rejuvenate your spirits? You might wonder how these concoctions were tested. Did the herbalists line up a few brave volunteers? Oh, you have a sore throat? Great. Try this urine and rosemary mix and let us know if you grow a second head. It's a gamble I wouldn't take today, but Tudor folks were different. Health was a gamble back then, and this was simply part of the game. You could think of it as live-action roleplay, where the tap water was cleaner, but instead of crafting swords, they crafted potions. The fear of plague loomed larger than the taste of rancid herbs, which might explain why so many relied on these cures. But the herbalist charm didn't stop at ailments. They also helped communities deal with the deep-rooted anxiety of witchcraft. Whenever someone was suspected of dabbling with the dark arts, and let's be honest, that could mean anything from bad bread to a neighbourly spat, urine was enlisted to flush out the so-called witches. Urine-infused brews would be pitched as the ultimate lie detector tests, or at least what the medieval equivalent of a lie detector would look like. which I imagine involved vigorous shaking and a healthy helping of finger crossing. If you float, you're definitely a witch. If you sink, well, then your chances are just slim. Most people were convinced that urine could be a powerful herb-infused elixir, a sentiment echoed loudly in taverns across the land. As people drank pints of ale, they'd swear by the power of 2 drops of urine mixed with a sprig of thyme to stave off whatever general malaise had the village on edge. Adding rosemary to the mix, of course, was considered gourmet. You know, nothing flavours my pottage quite like witch-hunting urine and a sprig of rosemary. Bon appétit! The audacity with which these recipes were shared could illuminate an entire century. As dawn broke over sleepy Tudor towns, herbalists would walk the markets with their wares, peddling recipes that sounded more like dirty jokes than serious remedies. Feeling a little sluggish? Try my special nettle and urine mix, guaranteed to clear those demons from your belly. More often than not, patrons would leave with more than just remedies. They'd leave with priceless anecdotes to share over dinner, like a thrilling episode of their favourite soap opera. And for those who scoffed at these remedies, well, let's just say they promptly avoided the sickly sweet potions lest they join the ranks of local law. An untamed mix of fever dreams and terrible earthy concoctions. There's nothing like a good round of urine therapy to transform your status from healthy citizen to that lady who tried urine potions and is now on the list of things to gossip about. Ultimately, Tudor urine therapy embodied more than mere health. It was a fascinating blend of community, culture, and hilarity. Sure, these folks might have been swimming in a vat of insanity, but in their bizarre reality, humour sprouted alongside the herbs, and every medicinal mixture became an opportunity for laughter. So lift your imaginary goblet high to the whimsical wonders of Tudor knowledge. Let us not forget the absurdity of it all as we drift off to sleep, thankful the wisdom of the past is behind us, but forever etched in our hearts, and perhaps regrettably on our next bathroom break. In Tudor times, a prick of a patient's finger rarely meant medical insight. Rather, it was a matter of doing a Bristol-level inspection of your latest disappointing urine sample. These doctors were the original health uploaders, using colour, smell, and who knows what to assess your ailments. Like a wine connoisseur trying to guess the vintage based on a single sip. And yes, it all stank. Imagine being somewhat unwell and having to present your golden jar of murky fluids for evaluation, while the doctor sniffed it like it was an open bottle of Cabernet. Ah, notes of asparagus with a hint of poor life choices, they'd announce before scribbling down your fate. To be more specific, these practitioners were men and women whose medical knowledge came not from universities, but from a rather colourful history of trial and error, and mostly from the trial, because the errors involved things that were better off left unsaid. Urine was seen as a liquid goldmine of information. Its hues might tell the doctor you had a liver problem, or drank far too much ale the night before. If it was cloudy, chances were you had a good case of something really bad. So before you even had a chance to sit down comfortably in their office, the wooden stool creaking beneath you, you were already suffering from anxiety over the fate of your urine sample. But of course, for every wannabe doctor sniffing away at your latest bodily byproduct, there were also a few charming oddities at work. You see, Tudor diagnoses were often enhanced by peer-reviewed experiments known as public opinion among local tavern dwellers. If a new remedy made it into the town square, you could bet there were folks both sceptical and willing to give it a try. The tavern was a much livelier locale than the doctor's office, and folks traded their diagnoses over flagons of ale as they contemplated why they felt awful. Oh yes, George, you definitely have the spotted phlegm disease from eating pickled herring and spending too much time with the geese. Who needed a licensed physician when your friends could diagnose you for free? As for common ailments, Tudor medicine claimed to treat everything from a cold to a broken heart with the same enthusiastic fervour. If your ailment were transferred into the anatomy like it was a labour of love, well, so was diagnosis. The common wisdom of the time suggested treatments ranging from smelling funny concoctions to ingesting equally funny concoctions. Potions brewed with various herbs sounded official, but the presence of eggshells or possibly dust from a mouldy loaf of bread, that was definitely a gamble. The age-old advice of if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, had never quite felt so treacherously literal. What's truly perplexing is that, despite the bizarre diagnostic methods, people accepted their doctors with a sense of solemnity. It was as if visiting them was akin to prophecies framed in the authoritative handbook formats which, let's be real, didn't even exist. The phrase "trust the process" might as well have graced the banners of every Tudor town, whether you were diagnosed through unorthodox methods or simply after an awkward visit to discuss why you can't stop scratching at flea bites. And what about the doctor's tools? Oh, how lovely they were. The treatment kit often contained an assortment of archaic instruments that resembled medieval kitchenware thrown into a bin of Zumba bargains. The true interface was often a scalpel that looked like it had survived a world war, and there wouldn't be any sterilisation before procedures because cleanliness was apparently for the overly picky. Just as hygienically alarming was the leech, a favoured all-cure that often resulted in more than the initial ailment. Let's drain some of your blood. This is sure to improve your complexion. Sure, if you could survive the horrific side effects like dying from blood loss or waving goodbye to your healthy leg. In all fairness, the diagnosis methods of Tudor medicine lived on in infamy, each ghostly piddle retrospected upon by modern medical professionals in disbelief. As you settle into more comfortable surroundings with access to doctors who won't make you present your bodily fluids at the front door, take a moment and give thanks, of sorts, to the urine-sipping medics of yesteryears. They taught us how ridiculous healthcare could be. So let's raise a glass. No, not a jar of urine, but to our more sensible present. Cheers to the miraculous blend of yuck and humour that was Tudor diagnosis. The famous green stream diagnosis emerged as a comedic highlight of winter illnesses. You could go downhill faster than the villagers used to slide down hills. A little dark urine could send similarly urinated fellows into fits of laughter, even if the physician was the butt of the joke. Hope you packed a laugh. It's winter in Tudor England, and let me tell you, battling the chill isn't just about wearing more wool. No, you're piling on the layers while praying your knees don't freeze solid. And then, surprise, you're struck with the dreaded green stream diagnosis that's more entertaining than a jester at a royal feast. Picture a humble Tudor cottage, where you wake up to find that not only has the weather turned blustery, but you also have a strange twinge in your side and that dreadful bellyache you thought you left behind the last time you drank that questionable ale. You roll out of bed, hugging your one wool tunic close, and head to your doctor, or rather, the closest man with dubious qualifications and surprisingly large jars of amber-coloured liquids. The diagnosis begins, of course, with a careful examination of your urine. In the eyes of the Tudor physician, your pee had a story to tell, and a vibrant dark green hue suggested something was off. It was a roaming entertainer, perhaps the medieval version of a mood ring, turning shades based on your internal turmoil. Green stream? Yes, that's a sign of humour imbalance, he would declare, straight-faced as if declaring a royal decree. You'd squint at him, certain that the only thing out of balance was the way too much porridge you had eaten the night before, or perhaps a sheep that had taken to the ale instead of grazing in the fields. Now, let's reflect on the medicinal brilliance of the time. While we are familiar with the concept of friends having each other's backs in modern healthcare, Tudor friends went a step further. They had each other's urine. Imagine your best mate coming over with a concerned look, exclaiming, "I just can't get over how green your stream was. Are you feeling okay?" Of course, you both collapse into uncontrollable laughter, reassured that this is entirely normal, at least as long as no one notices Bertie in the corner sniffing the jars in disgust, while simultaneously grinding herbs to concoct a new elixir. The bustling towns were filled with anecdotal remedies that often began with, "You know, I heard from old Margaret," which was usually the start of the wildest ideas. Urine mixed with herbs meant anyone could become a herbalist in no time, but only if they survived the lingering laughter at the taverns on wash days, where jokes about green streams flourished like barley. If one could survive that embarrassment without being red-faced, one was truly a champion of Tudor humour. As you review your latest trip to the pot, undoubtedly more entertaining in hindsight, you begin to realise that the stream of health advice got more absurd as the recipe books turned yellow with age. Just add some cotton from the sheep and a pinch of sunshine. 3 laughs will do. And so, your doctor's prescriptions made it sound like a witch's cauldron rather than honest medicine. It's like you accidentally switch professions during a fit of laughter. You'd ask yourself, was that the point? But let's not forget about the grand social gathering surrounding these diagnoses, people amalgamating to discuss their green streams over cups of ale. Instead of the neighbouring gossip concerning Mrs. Crabtree's missing pies, you'd hear about who went to the doctor last and what shade their production turned out. You might even hear something like Gerald's pea was the colour of leaves in spring, while the whole room roared with laughter. It seemed that the local tavern's walls were never truly devoid of humour about health, even when one should have been. Just think about it. The green stream kept villagers bonded, uniting them over comic relief that disguised their plights of survival. The laughter masked the pitting fevers and illnesses, turning painful situations into hearty stories retold across tavern wooden tables. So, when the winter frost bit too deeply, and you couldn't stave off the chill, you'd realise laughter could save you. After all, who wouldn't want that delightful warm blanket of friendship and comedic banter? You'd join the merry folk who declared, "Let the green stream roll, for laughter is the best remedy in all of Tudor England." And in that moment, you'd find hope lingering beneath the whimsical cry of health advice, laughing all the way through the cold days ahead. It's no laughing matter. Okay, maybe it is, considering Tudor onlookers giggled at potions of pee like it was the funniest thing since bread started to rise. With urine being the original potion for a pick-me-up, you'd see that Tudor doctors had a sense of humour, or at least that their patients did. Imagine standing in a dimly lit tavern, surrounded by regulars sipping cures, with elevated brows while exchanging witty banter about which local lunatics swore by their latest urine remedy. There's a certain charm to the absurdity of it all, and if we're honest, it might make you chuckle even now, where the thought of a urine cocktail sounds more absurd than appetizing. Let's talk about the hilariously cavalier attitude towards health in Tudor England. Did you feel a chill in your bones? Perfect. A few goblets of someone else's golden nectar were right there available on the Half-Rotten Tavern shelf. Now, remember, asking for a non-fat, low-carb, extra pea potion wouldn't do much for your reputation, but it could endear you to the local apothecary. You could simply consider it a well-documented version of shared health wealth, provided someone managed to keep it below the waist. Who truly could blame them for sharing bodily fluids when they were all in this together? Now, why were these folks so eager to drink another's innermost liquid? It stemmed from a profound, albeit misplaced, belief in bodily humours. Medical practice was a delightful blend of superstition and wild theory, which meant that most ailments could be traced back to a malfunction in the body's balance. Notably if your pee was yellow enough to resemble a jester's costume. When you had a cough, flu, Or maybe even a case of the dreaded looking at my neighbour's wife all day. Urine took centre stage. Peel back the layers of time, and there you'd find Tudor medics channeling their interior decorators, wearing vibrant robes while mixing potions that might have easily been mistaken for avant-garde paint mixtures. And speaking of creativity, it was not just your average jar of pee on the counter. Oh no, my friend! Tudor concoctions involved mixing urine with a smorgasbord of herbal delights. What's that in your drink? Is it sweetened with rosemary? Oh dear, is that really garlic? It was the medieval version of a hipster cafe's artisanal latte, except, you know, this latte could double as a treatment for your festering malaise. Behind every potion was a unique artistic endeavour, a gruesome yet unintentionally humorous gallery of wellness gone awry. There's also an intriguing community aspect to consider. Picture villagers clustering together during the annual Feel Better festival. Ah, yes, themed according to the finest workings of an apothecary's crannies, where competitors could proudly display their homebrew pea concoctions, while the mayor encouraged everyone to cast doubts aside. To health, they shouted as cups clinked amidst uproarious laughter, all while the drunken bard sat by the fire recounting tales from their inevitable stumble into the nearest outhouse. And listen, while comedy cuts across centuries, so does human folly. Some peasant in the corner might be nervously relating how Old Man Miller just cured his gout by potting his toe in a bucket full of healing tinctures. And, dare I say it, urine. Was everyone drinking it? Why not experiment? Now that's the spirit of communal healing, bringing friends together over the hilariously grotesque often led to gleeful shared stories and hopefully better health. But lest you think we're out of ideas for liquid laughter, Tudor improvised wildly with rumours, legends and predictions about health benefits based solely on the quality of flow. Each stream of urine became a potential elixir of life, where skirmishes over the last drop could ignite the same passion in medieval patience akin to chocolate wars. Briefly looking to the skies, you may have heard whispers about the benefits of catching rain mixed with a bit of fresh pea splashing down from rooftops during spring rains to ward off pestilence. The power of humour blended seamlessly with palliative care. A true performance art worthy of any modern reality show. So as we wind down our trip into this delightful celebration of absurdity, let us bid farewell to urine's comedic role in Tudor health. They might not have had effective antibiotics or knowledge of germs, but they sure knew how to keep laughter alive amidst uncertainty. Urine may have been the original potty joke, but it left behind a legacy of humour. Let's raise a glass, not one filled with urine, of course, to our fascinatingly silly Tudor ancestors who propelled us forward, often laughing at themselves all the way. The Tudors enjoyed hearty fare flavoured with a regal touch that would later follow in the footsteps of excessive consumption. People believed that what you consumed, from fruits to copious amounts of liquid sunshine, could ward off all kinds of ailments. Ever had to eat a dish your buddy claimed was cancerous because it was not washed enough? Well, Tudor cooks surely fed you that, drenched in someone's golden nectar. You see, in this famously extravagant age, every meal was a potential remedy, and culinary adventure rolled into one. And it wasn't merely about feeding the body, it was about appeasing whatever dark clouds of illness prowled around corners of your health. Picture yourself sitting at a grand wooden table, your nose assaulted by the smells of roasting meat, baked bread, and the not-so-refreshing odour of the fish that spent a bit too much time in the warm summer sun. For the Tudors, the lavish spread was more than just a feast. It was a chance for self-medication. If you believed you are what you eat, then, my friend, it was time to get porridge and pies in your system that would make even a hardened peasant cringe. A stew laced with warmed piss. That could work wonders on your cold. Somehow the theory of urine-infused culinary arts was on the menu, alongside meat pies filled with questionable cuts of meat and mysteriously sourced veggies. Freshness was overrated when your health depended on the unknown. Now raw vegetables were treated almost like modern-day food poisoners. Is it safe to eat? Was usually answered with, only if you're feeling particularly brave, my friend. Fresh produce could be suspicious, laden with invisible pathogens or peasant's urine, allegedly left behind because it hadn't been washed properly. You might think living during the Tudor period was all about schmoozing with royalty and living lavishly. But alas, it was also a time of making the best of unwashed greens with an opportunity to express your guile. With grains being the staple diet, the kitchen was where cleverness and creativity flourished, albeit surrounded by flies. Pottage, the medley of roots, grains, and whatever they could scrounge, was the meal of choice. Tonight's special is a mystery stew, you'd hear the server call across the room, filling your imagination with visions of bold flavours. But don't get too excited. The occasional turnip or bit of curdled cheese could be lurking in there, ready to pounce on your sense of taste. Ever wondered what they washed it all down with? None other than a delightful cup of lukewarm ale or mead. In the Tudor world, hydration meant a loving embrace of muddled flavours. Forget about that fancy filtered water. You couldn't trust it. So instead, drunken merriment and potential insanity reigned supreme. From sunrise sans breakfast to late night whiskey, you weren't quenching your thirst. You were indulging in a liquid health gamble that always tipped the scales of chance on your side. And let's talk about dessert. With sugar more precious than diamonds, sweet treats were rare gems that danced around the presence of half-rotted fruits, which somehow got presented with a smile that said, "It's all natural. Consider it a cure for your ailments." Picked from trees without the modern care of hand-washing, every remaining bite sent everyone pondering whether their teeth would survive worse than a soupy roast. Of course, if you were feeling particularly sassy, you'd make a flavourful wager with one of the local apothecaries. A shilling for healing would be the motto, with many convinced their next meal guaranteed them good fortune. Your buddy would laugh uproariously as he tried something that looked oddly like a pint of a liquid sunshine served up with a side of healthy scepticism. But what was the risk if it made you feel just a little more alive? Delving into the nutritional practices of the Tudors was a grand odyssey. Every meal served as a gamble for the palate and health. Come share a laugh across time and prepare to embrace the unexpected. Who knew eating should come with both pledges of devotion and risks of life? With every swallow you were living on the edge of possibility, plunging into a society where even the most regal of feasts could carry the echo of someone's liquid gold, if only they knew. Tugging on a thread of humour, we find that those good old-fashioned remedies bonded them like a robust pot of pottage. Here's to the gallant and questionable nutritional journey of the Tudors. Dine with dignity, considerable humour required. The local taverns stocked more than just beer. They had their own botanical bar with mysterious festive brews that could cure what ailed you, even if it meant splashing some kidney trouble mixed drinks in as well. Raise a glass to those who dared to drink away all ailments. Walk into one of these bustling establishments, and you'll find a cacophony of chatter, clinking mugs, and the sweet aroma of roasting meats mingling with something a tad more pungent. You pull up a stool by the bar, and just like that you're immersed in a world where hydration is a matter of life, or at least buzz, of death. Your nonchalant tavern keeper is ready to serve up a health tonic, a drink made with a generous splash of the golden liquid that locals insisted could cure anything. Was it really made with someone's fresh urine, or was it more about the placebo effect? Either way, you can't help but wonder how a shot of baby yellow suddenly turned into a health elixir as you catch sight of a fellow patron downing a concoction with the enthusiasm of a man about to face his in-laws. But it wasn't just ordinary ale serving as the medicinal marvel. The tavern played host to concoctions packed with mysterious herbs and, dare I say, genuine wizardry that made each drink feel like a festive potion concocted by the neighbourhood alchemist. Want to tackle fatigue? They'd add ginseng, trouble sleeping. They infused their brews with valerian, the herbal champ that could knock you out like a well-timed elbow from a friendly cutthroat during a game of dice. And laughter served as a side dish, of course, because who wouldn't want a talented bard strumming a lute and singing about the local barmaid's, unique odour? The remarkable part? Nobody seemed bothered by the idea of sharing their ailments openly. You hear shouts of, "I've got the pox," alongside someone bragging about their cure for the chronic sniffles that has, of course, been tested and approved by a good few customers. Who needs validation from a physician when you can consult with your favourite local's poor judgment over a pint? Every tavern shared its own local lore, often propelled by a game of guess where my kidneys went with each drink served. Those who trusted the wisdom of the tavern's regulars patronised the urine brew more than they'd care to admit, proudly stating, "It's the yeast. Yeast keeps you strong." But behind that bravado lay a bone-chilling truth. Half the town would probably end up consulting their barber surgeons for help, if only to better explain the yellow-tinged aftermath of their wild adventures. Now, let's talk about food, shall we? In the vibrant context of Tudor taverns, the line between drink and meal was about as fine as a midwife's needle. A feast of cheese and bread often accompanied the stockpot stews that might have boasted a proud lineage of whatever falls off the cart today, and you can bet a good urine ale would have been the perfect pairing for a hearty bowl of gruel, filtered through memories of last night's gut-busting shindig. They say some in the city even claim they gained strength just from holding in the dubious strokes of fermentation. But amidst the laughter and jest, the tavern also served as a community care centre, a kind of therapy space where people shared stories and remedies. Folks would swap tales of their latest health, miracles, calamities ranging from cure-all pimples turned bubbly illusions to rashes that could only be cured by some winged creature's feather, mixed in a hearty splash of tinctured stuff, urine or otherwise. Call it the Tudor equivalent of Yelp reviews, where the only risk factor was the taste of your fingers after drinking. At the end of the night, as the moon rose high above the scattered rooftops, tavern patrons would stumble homeward with more confidence than certainty, convinced that the secret to eternal health lay somewhere between laughter, pints of potent brews, and a hefty dose of local charm. As for the slippery alchemical brews, well, the results were about as predictable as life in Tudor England itself, unreliable at best and splashing good fun at worst. Surprisingly, urine wasn't reserved for the bedraggled masses alone. Wealthier Tudors also dabbled in urine remedies, believing premium health boosts could be created from a more refined source. The richer the urine, the fancier the potion. Pity those in dire need. They literally needed a golden source. Picture this. While common folk were downing their elixirs at the local tavern, the upper crust of Tudor society was holding court, flaunting the nectar of nobility. Imagine a wine tasting, but instead of Merlots and Chardonnays, it's all about different aged pea. Serving suggestions might include picking the finest golden stream for a superior health buzz, turning cheeks green and smiles yellow. Doctors of noble descent advertised liquid gold as a wondrous remedy for their affluent patrons. Noble ladies often held dramatic tea parties where, instead of gossiping about the latest fashion faux pas, they compared the various hues and odours of their respective urine samples. Darling, mine has a lovely golden sheen. Yours, I dare say, smacks of last night's turnip. It was a world of refinement and finesse, with a side of bizarre. Just picture the scene. delicate porcelain cups filled to the brim with a rich, shimmering liquid, swirling and catching the light like something out of a fairy tale. If that fairy tale involved a particularly adventurous child who drank a bit too much soda before bed. But there was more to this than mere social status. It was believed that a noble's dietary habits, specifically their rich foods, robust wines, and lack of daily exertion, would yield superior urine. If one must drink pee, wouldn't it be best to sample the finest vintage? You can hear someone reasoning, while the townsfolk are simply hoping to fend off their latest maladies with whatever concoction they could muster. You would think that this might cause some embarrassment among the nobility, perhaps prompting the slightest blush as they discreetly visited the chamber pots, but nope. Instead, the upper class took pride in what they peed, much as they did with their pedigreed puppies. Consider the marketing campaigns of the time. Enterprising alchemists discovered how to bottle and sell specialized urine concoctions, labeled with flowery names that promised a cure for everything from minor ailments to, who knows, eternal youth. Just imagine stumbling upon a health market where stalls sold options like Royal Relief or Elixir of Endless Energy, all derived from fancy folks literally letting loose. With every purchase, you'd feel a sense of prestige wash over you as you quaffed what your neighbours could only dream of tasting. Yet beneath this golden sheen lay the practical realities of the Tudor era. How did they procure these exquisite golden draughts? Well, imagine the hustle. Wealthy families had to carefully guard their bladder secrets. Families employed special pee collectors, whose job it was to tap into society's upper crust literally. A method similar to that of vintage grape picking, these collectors would collect the freshest urine, ideally before breakfast. Nothing beats a first morning stream after all that night's rest. After collecting these precious golden droplets, they'd whisk them away to be bottled, labelled, and sold to the thirsty populace, or, surprisingly, the royal court itself. Of course, this entire scheme wasn't without its drawbacks. Imagine the stigma that accompanied someone who had to drink the urine of another, especially when scandals erupted regarding the ethics of such practices. Oh my, Lady Agnes just boasted about how she supplements her energy by downing Sir Reginald's nighttime lot. Little whispers darted from ear to ear in the court. You can only imagine the confessions of pee-induced cocktails at the next soiree. Someone may have gained or lost social standing depending on how well their beverage went down with the crowd. At the end of the day, whether it was the exploits of the peasants who'd concoct their own remedies, or the cringeworthy practices of nobles relishing their refined liquid courage, Tudor society was unquestionably characterised by its attitudes towards bodily functions. Soothing maladies with reckless abandon, the people of this age invited humour and absurdity into their health rituals in a most liquid form. It's a wild world where no one batters an eye at a drink labelled ultra urine, just so long as it's been branded a remedy of high distinction. And you know what? In hindsight, it feels like wonderful inspiration for modern-day cocktail parties. Who knew urine could be such a classy affair? So, if you find yourself a little leery the next time someone invites you to a party centred around health drinks, give that golden nectar a second thought. After all, even in Tudor times, sometimes laughter really was the best medicine, however pungent the delivery may have been. Are we cured yet? Only the all-powerful Human Urine Collective could decide. As scientific methods slowly trickled in, the Tudor world of mechanical peeing transitioned much too slowly into reasoning. Patients failed to understand the mind games played simply from a sample, setting a comedic precedent for misunderstanding health and wellness. You see, in Tudor England, if you felt unwell, your ailments were as vivid as the colours in your urine, at least according to the local doctors and their trusty jars. Every colour of pee became a coded message, as if your bladder was a medieval oracle dispensing wisdom about your health. Imagine this scene. You, a poor peasant feeling a bit off, stumble into the local physician's establishment, which is less about fancy instruments and more about a collection of jars that would rival a hoarder's paradise. The doctor, armed with a dubious level of training, glances at your yellow liquid and announces that it screams an excess of bile. You can't help but wonder how someone can hear a scream from a pea jar. Does he have superhuman powers? You're half expecting an actual echo to bounce back at you. As you sit there marinating in self-doubt, the doctor's assistant shuffles in to take your pulse. Instead, they grab a cup and throw your urine at a sheet to track the magic hues. You think, is this a medical practice or a bizarre art installation? But hey, anything goes when it comes to healing in Tudor times. And of course, they treat potential customers with the kind of medical advice we would consider absurd today. Your pee resembles that of a goat post-yodeling, which means you need a hearty dose of boiled worms and a breath of lavender, proclaimed the doctor with the enthusiasm of a street magician about to unveil a trick. All the while, you're grappling with the idea of consuming boiled worms as your remedy. How does he know what a goat's urine looks like? You ponder, a fair question given the circumstances. These diagnostics weren't just self-contained oddities. The urine game escalated into social discussions, with clusters of the well-to-do gossip and speculation hit the high notes like a medieval ballad. Did you hear Cuthbert's urine was bright yellow? I've seen salvaged crustaceans look better, became themes that echoed through the village tavern, a dreadful mix of intrigue and horror, proving that in Tudor England nobody's health ever eluded the watchful eyes of the community. Who needs privacy when your bladder is the talk of the town? Folks would gather around the pub to recount their own urine saga, transforming everyday ailments into tales of epic proportions. Ah, sir, my sister drank puddle water urine tea last week and miraculously woke up cured of weakness. She's just got the urine touch, I've said. You'd get the feeling that urine was fast becoming a currency of sorts. What better way to trade gossip than through tales of liquid, treasures saved from the depths of one's bladder? And before long, self-help literature focusing on the right potty topics emerged, promising the ultimate guide to plumbing your way through the dark waters of Tudor health. For those particularly cunning, they even devised unique titles like The Art of Pee, Knowing When to Let It Flow, and Pissing Potential, the currency of capacious health. Imagine unwinding in bed by candlelight, flipping through pages covered in sketches of men happily waving their jars at the sunset. Charmed yet. Strangely, physicians kept showing results of their findings, some even proclaiming the use of urine as a beauty treatment, ensuring you're as luminous as a hydrated oracle. Chase away those wrinkles by applying a pee pack, they'd encourage. As laughter filled the air, you must have thought, how attractive could I be with urine-slathered cheeks? The volume of urine put to magical use became synonymous with the sovereignty of comedy and chaos. At last, in this wild world of urine mind games, it became clear. Tudor diagnosis was a delightful cocktail of guesswork, excessive imagination, and social whimsy that turned pee into folklore. While today's scientific methods dance around precision, back then, the only precision required came from acceptable humour and ample courage. To witness the blow of the bladder and perhaps chuckle in the face of all entries on P-Play. Yes, we may chuckle at the absurdities of the past, but one cannot help but respect the resilience of a society using every available resource, human or otherwise, in the quest for health and happiness, especially while navigating the peculiar waterways of Tudor life. So let's raise a glass, one filled with more aesthetically pleasing refreshments than urine. Cheers to embracing the quirks of history. Imagine being the poor soul coerced into attending a doctor who swears by pee. Protests would ring out as patients would confusedly research methods to escape. It wasn't unusual for the crowd to debate who had the worst prescription, leading to lively discussions at the water cooler, only, not really. You could picture a disgruntled peasant banging on the door of a dingy Tudor office, shouting something akin to, "You're not going to stick me with that yellow potion again, are you?" It becomes a comical saga where the brave or foolish would line up for remedies, their faith in sanity hanging by a thread much like their last connection to cleanliness. Let's delve into the absurdity that was medical consulting in Tudor England, where the process started rolling with a less than great atmosphere of rotting smells and questionable hygiene. Hopeful patients would shuffle into darkened rooms filled with the aroma of damp straw and possibly the remnants of unwashed tunics. And there sat the doctor, armed with a clipboard that could only be rivalled by an overflowing chamber pot, ready to take them on a journey through their bodily functions in excruciating detail. "Tell me, good sir, how does your pee sing today?" would often echo as the doctor beckoned the patient nearer to the unsterilised collections of jars cluttering the countertop. For the townsfolk, going to the doctor felt like a trip to a rather unrefined circus of nonsense. You could hear the whispers as patients passed one another in the waiting area, softly murmuring about ink blots, sitting near urinals, while silently keeping track of how many times they had to smell the good doctor's special blend. Was it ginger or yesterday's leeks? You'd have to wonder if all those pints had ever been tested for sanity. Fear not. The idea of dodging appointments meant you could instead hop on the latest fad, the pee protest. These protest gatherings were legendary, contrasting the serious weight of illness with light-hearted disdain. Groups formed to share their success stories of bladder-sourced cures, albeit mixed with a touch of scepticism that gleamed brighter than the Tudor sun. "Last week, I took a swig of what was left in Margaret's bucket," one man proclaimed, only to elicit hearty laughter that echoed off the walls. It was never a dull moment. "And as you can see," he continued, "I still have 9 fingers instead of just 1. The irony was not lost on the crowd as they rolled their eyes at the diagnosis driftwards polluting their village. Navigating the world of pee prescriptions required quite a knack for good storytelling. After all, how many home remedies could you come up with on a winter's evening without warming your heart with tales of desperate cures? What was that leg pain you had, Tobias? A simple nosebleed from a drunk peasant's fist. Toss it in some vinegar and let the leeches have a go at it. Eventually, those so-called remedies entwined with the comedic chaos, encouraging fun-filled debates amidst friendships born of absurdity. Surely, if you could drink a concoction that smelled like it had been ferreted out from the depth of the castle's moat, you could spin a yarn that might just get you a pint on the house. Of course, leaning into laughter while grappling with illness was a mixed bag. Some peasant would undoubtedly stumble out of those appointments completely baffled, unaware that a tincture meant to cure their troubles was merely a preposterous testament to human folly. They might find solace in the indignities around them, anxiously rethinking their life choices as they stepped outside to the chorus of cackling crows. Did they really need to divulge such intimate details over cups of urine? Or was it better to venture into the unknown sorrows of the human condition, sans a dose of liquid radiance? In those moments, humour reigned supreme, and as crowds grew, the tide of urine-infused camaraderie turned into something of an art form. Battling their unfortunate health conditions became a shared experience fueled by absurdity, weaving together tales that became family heirlooms of their own. The fluid exchange of pea-laden advice formed friendships that thrived on laughter, no matter how peculiar the antidotes were. Thus, we arrive at the end of our visit to the doctor's office, with laughter echoing in our hearts, and a slight wariness of the bottle of yellow liquid we just got handed. You could argue it was less about treatment and more about creating brotherhood within bladder battles. Who knew you could bond over such a bizarre history? But ultimately, next time illness struck, you might think twice before accepting treatments from the next eccentric doctor claiming an elixir stolen from the fountain of pea-liciousness. Everything's just a little larger than life, declared the doctors, as they anticipated the volume of the little yellow jars they'd keep on their desks. Lamentably, some folks believed drinking the big cup of urine would help grow limbs back. Spoiler alert, there is not much proof to this pint-sized myth. Yet, in the swirling mists of Tudor England, where logic often took a backseat to fervent faith, people devised all sorts of whimsical theories regarding the capabilities of their bodily fluids. Imagine a world where chugging someone else's liquid sunshine was viewed as the ultimate solution to adversity. You stubbed your toe, glug that yellow juice, lost a finger in a farming accident? Don't worry, get yourself a pot. The staggering notion that urine held miraculous properties was based more on a desperate hope than medical savvy. Why else would people be so eager to consume the contents of a chamber pot when a little herbal tea might suffice? Meanwhile, the real fight for health was often fought against the rising tide of infectious diseases, poor hygiene, and the occasional pig that wandered a little too freely. People, driven by hope and misunderstanding, rallied around these ideas with all the fervour of a medieval cheerleading squad. "Drink up, you'll grow your arm back," shouted the local apothecary, often while waving a feathered quill for dramatic effect. Did you know that some poor souls who attempted this drastic measure got quite used to the flavour of their own urine sun-dried on rooftops? No, not a gourmet dish, but surely it fit the Tudor diet of odd culinary adventures. Urine didn't just flow into cups, but was swirled into concoctions alongside spices, herbs, and whatever other bits of magic those enterprising soothsayers had lying around. Picture it. One doctor scribbling notes on how to mix urine with crushed garlic, while his assistant fills up a bucket with liquid gold. Who needs a modern pharmacy when you have your own urine station right at your bedside, likely accompanied by a charming waft of goat dung from next door? Medical students, if they could correctly sniff out the right jars, might find themselves up to their elbows in it all, not the kind of education the average parent hopes for when their child attends med school. Yet in all this madness there lay a stubborn persistence, a belief that through shared liquid blessings, yes, how wretchedly intimate, one could overcome ailments and maybe even regrow limbs. After all, a healthy dose of faith always accompanied these shiny brews, and what bad luck was there to drink your former self into wholeness, even if that meant sipping a bit of last week's accumulation. Always ready for any situation, the Tudor folks were as skillful with their patients as they were with their family recipes, whether they were for stew or soporifics. Misconceptions varied wildly, from urine can enhance stamina to a good splash can cure your blues. As those medieval practitioners clucked and muttered among themselves, sure enough, someone stuck their arm in a bucket for a cure-all claim, tied neatly with a sprig of lavender. Artistic ambition was alive and well. Imagine being visited by a knight in shining armour, a bit tipsy after a bout at the local tavern, who declared, "My health lies in the excretions of the aged," with a hearty laugh, only to find the villagers nodding solemnly, convinced that pee could indeed be the golden ticket out of misery's ticket line. Let's not forget that this era lacked the plethora of scientifically sound thoughts we hold dear today. And while it strikes us as laughably absurd now, back then, these beliefs offered comfort to souls seeking healing while dodging the plague or general medieval miseries. How thrilling it must have been to tell the tale around the fireside. Just had a sip of old tadpoles, nearly healed my broken wrist. Eventually, as the scientific community began to evolve and medicine advanced, these pee-pants myths were bandied about less frequently, often relegated to historical footnotes and folk tales. Eventually doctors shifted their focus from drink up to maybe we should examine this unusual infection a little more closely. Nonetheless, let's tip our hats to those quirky doctors and peasants whose chutzpah led them to explore the fascinating, if sometimes unhygienic, world of urine. Their steadfastness in strange remedies serves as a humorous mirror to our modern obsession with wellness trends. After all, if we've learned anything from the past, it's that laughter truly is the best medicine, often paired with a healthy dose of absurdity. The idea that illnesses could simply disappear after a few jugs of pee remained firmly lodged in comedic history. Movies weren't needed to showcase skepticism in the early modern period, when a lady named Adeline proclaimed she was cured simply by watching her neighbour's severe cold grind down. You can't make this stuff up. In Tudor England, where logic danced with absurdity on the wobbly stage of human health, people actually believed that their ailments could wash away with a splash of yellow wonder. So, join us on this uproarious roller coaster of urine-induced confusion that only the good people of the 1500s could concoct. Imagine a bustling village square where townsfolk gathered around the local apothecary, who looked both suspicious and dishevelled, like someone who'd just lost a hen in a chess game. As you stroll closer, you overhear a group of gossips dissecting the latest cure-all, which naturally involves the mystical properties of pee. "My cousin Geraldine's rash practically vanished after a pint," one woman exclaims, clutching her stomach in disbelief or laughter. What could possibly go wrong, right? You have to admire her optimism, even if it smells suspiciously like last week's compost. In this curious land, skepticism and blind faith live side by side, sometimes even under the same roof. Local jesters and wise fools would engage audiences with witty banter about the latest remedies, taking great delight in both hypothetical cures and the unintended consequences of a urine-free diet. "What's the difference between a sick person and a healthy one?" they'd ask, pausing theatrically. "About a barrel of pee, give or take." Hilarity ensued amid moments of bewildered laughter, where townsfolk wondered if their ailments could be resolved by merely holding their breath. You might be surprised, but some folks didn't just sip urine. Oh no, they were bold enough to proclaim they found it had healing properties when applied topically. Picture it now, a gentleman bravely revealing his legs to cover up an embarrassing case of athlete's foot while advocating liquid sunshine as the most effective remedy. Who knew that treating foot fungus meant scrubbing down with the golden nectar? If you think modern-day skincare routines are unnecessary, just imagine being presented with a bottle marked P for feet that came with an impossible promise: achieve a pedicure worthy of royal discretion. Skepticism also bred creativity in the art of pee lore. In the midst of back-alley debates on health, reasonable folk concocted their own fanciful cures, often resulting in competitive demonstrations. One neighbour, whose fanciful concoctions were popular among village children, would loudly claim he could cure a cold with orange juice made from actual oranges plus a simple tonic of pee and regret. Other vendors would chime in, empty pitchers in hand, to extol a nearby neighbour's miracle wine. You'd have to wonder whether it was a party or a health concern by this point. As absurd as these tales seem, they did inspire a lot of laughter, and sometimes even led to strange friendships forged in the fires of shared skepticism. When a sailor docked at the village harbour firmly rejected pee as a cure for poor hygiene, a riot of laughter erupted. Everyone chimed in, claiming their aversion to the ancient remedy proved that the sailor must have a witch among his crew or be on the slow road to insanity. The interwoven tales of those around the tavern spread swiftly, leaving behind tales that were as infectious as the ailments they tried to cure. Still, there were moments when the commonplace blending of humour and urine could take a surprisingly reflective turn. Picture throngs of villagers exchanging their own stories of miraculous cures, only to realise they were all merely believers in their own mythos. skepticism may have bubbled beneath their laughter, creating an unassuming community united in the chaos of poor health and predictable maladies. A smattering of yellow glasses raised high cheered atop their maladies, boiling laughter in the face of despair. In the end, this anti-P culture led to the development of a curious camaraderie among those who actually challenged medicinal practices with humour. No amount of skepticism could escape the absurdity of those heaped-in pride potions that the P.O.logists concocted. As a historical parallel, these folks knew that laughter could carry them further than a syringe full of liquid gold. So, from the courtly chambers to the village tavern, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the shared spirit of laughter might have just been the most potent remedy of all for this indirectly pee-happy crowd. Follow the waggling fortunes of those who sought out a potion king. Battling epidemics always makes for a great showdown. You can almost hear the doors echoing as gallons of urine were spilled to create questionable concoctions. Maybe that's why the royal guards were always so chatty. There's a lot to talk about when potion making's all about what works. A grand tapestry woven from spices, herbs, and of course, the dreaded golden nectar, made every corner of Tudor England smell like an apothecary loose on a cabbage farm. Nothing quite captured the imagination of a desperate populace as effectively as word of a royal remedy, preferably brewed in the back of a dimly lit tavern, while the barman's brother-in-law offers unsolicited advice. Imagine the chaos in a bustling court, where lords and ladies crammed the halls like overstuffed sausages, eager to sip the latest cure concocted by a self-proclaimed expert, or a dodgy herbalist with a penchant for theatrics. Urine transactions often involved a touch of sleight of hand. Even the way they'd mix it up in a potion could lead to legacies of secret struggles or harebrained elixirs. But who's questioning structure when the potion king claims you'll grow an extra toe if you're lucky? Ever tried convincing your peers that their deaths were a mere chance of bad luck over someone's lack of oily lotions? Yes, nothing said royal, quite like questionable bodily fluids. This infusion of creativity led to some rather comical misfires. Picture this: a potion gone wrong, supposedly meant to cure the common cold, that instead resulted in the drinker breaking out in disco fever, feverishly dancing through the halls until everyone fled in panic. If the king didn't see the humour in the newfound enchantment, at least his courtiers did. And why wouldn't they? It was less about actual healing and more about the entertainment value, and let's face it, bathroom breaks had never been so popular. Royal health had never looked so absurd, and each potion not only reiterated how hive-minded paranoia could result in pure comedy gold, but it also invited mischievous behaviour from budding pranksters in the audience, diligently pushing a pint of liquid hilarity, healing, forward. The patrons now compete for who could create the most vile-visaged tincture to impress the potion king, who was always a half-step away from a bafflingly potent reaction. Even with the royal, their noses luxuriously bubbling onto shiny chalices, the truth about their patronage lay cloaked under a wave of cluster sneezes and whimsical fables about miraculous results. All of this wavered dangerously close to silliness, because amidst the chaos, true healing fell between the cracks like stray drops of, yep, you guessed it, urine. If one potion didn't flounder brilliantly, they'd just try again, sort of like an endless game of scientific roulette, but with just a splash of splatter. But not only the potency of the potions was at stake here, the very credibility of the royal remedy often lay upon the shoulders of those brave enough to drink it. And yes, I mean brave, because any sane person would ponder why their next round would taste like. Well, you know what? Villagers became accustomed to cheering while pointing at the unfortunate souls who ended up in a bathroom sprint after a rousing bout of, I dare you, or, it worked for my Uncle Cedric, and he said it was a life changer. Mixed signals led to legends, with folk tales lamenting how missteps in potion making could transform one's royal decree into a royal decree of nasty. Word of mouth spread faster than a contagious disease as enthusiastic potion seekers rushed to make PC-Cal investment as a cure. Fewer living witnesses meant fewer tongue-tied admissions. As the adage goes, once you're laughing, you can't stop, unless there's a serious plumbing emergency going down. Meanwhile, the Potion Kings reigned supreme, handing out their bizarre brews with gleeful chaos, predicting miraculous transformations while their friends and enemies alike eagerly debated the next big hit. So, with powdered herbs, intent glances, and a sizable helping of royal laughter, the Tudor court transformed into a kaleidoscope capturing imaginations, while the next drink somehow found its way back to your kitchens. Medieval style. With urine flowing as freely as the humour from your neighbours, everyone kept their eyes peeled for the next spout of potential pea magic lurking nearby. Laughter bubbled up amongst the deadpan responses, and suddenly history becomes not just a reflection of fact, but one of generosity toward the absurd encounters we share along the urine-soaked road to recovery. Do you serve a drink or give thy heat to your aspiring sickie admirers? Trials of urine were more of a comedic death sentence than you'd expect, as illusions of efficacy masked harrowing experiences. If drinking it was in fact a full-circle disaster, you'd be cheering for survivors. Picture it. Noblemen and common folk alike gathered in taverns and homes, holding chalices of their own urine aloft as if toasting a fine wine at a banquet. To your health, they would cheer, before downing the contents like it was the latest trend, because clearly nothing says, "I've got this," quite like a slug of your own bodily waste. Now, you might assume that these practices were largely harmless. How bad could it really be? Unfortunately, it was less about health and more akin to participating in a low-stakes game show where bright colours and fancy hats hid the crumbling reality of Tudor medicine. Picture a medieval carnival where the main event was Guess That Pea. Contestants would present their samples and, primarily through the ignorance of willful optimism, declare their healers the ultimate winners. Effectively, these urine trials turned serious ailments into theatrics, as if one could outshine their neighbour with a particularly murky mix deemed the newest and best remedy. But the reality was more like Survivor Urine Edition. Imagine a doctor preparing his diagnosis for a poor soul who came to him unable to stop sneezing. Your humours, dear friend, clearly demonstrate an affliction. We must toast to your recovery, he might exclaim, disregarding the fact that the majority of healing techniques in this era often revolved around guesswork and trial. Truly, the kind of "you'll probably be fine" sense of medical oversight that would lead to the eventual demise of many hopeful patients. Life expectancy wasn't a guarantee, let alone drinking potions brewed from golden liquid. Let's not forget the odd mix of camaraderie and competition that emerged from these urinary gatherings. Local competitions sprouted in villages where townsfolk would present their cure of the month and jockey for adoration, all in the name of good health. One could quite easily see townsfolk gathering and exchanging oh so slightly not so fresh stories of cures gone wrong. Did you hear about Ethel? She drank 10 cups and exploded 2 days later. If only the judges considered the quality of jokes to accompany the remedies. Now that would have raised the stakes. Of course, the surprise wasn't just that many survived. The real tragedy lay in the faithful belief that urine could solve broken bones, migraines, and everything in between. Whether it was mixed with honey for flavour or paired with garlic for added benefits, the trend seemed to shift as quickly as hearty laughter around a feast table. Tempting as it was to mix, Researchers now understand that overindulgence could result in more harms than healings. Upon this tangent, someone would tongue-in-cheek declare, I present to you a new chicken broth. You may require laminated instructions to use, however. But imagine the conversations. Could you survive a premium pint when it was discovered that your neighbour's cat had jumped into the brew? Urine-related humour became its own genre, paving the way for tales born from the ashes of those ill-fated remedies. Young scholars turned into highly trained observationalists, taking note as they hearkened back to an era when priorities between life, health, and humour blurred into extraordinary tales of irony and gall, debating whether triumph or tragedy outweighed those that dared drink from the chalice of their mishaps. And what of the disillusioned wanderers, wagering their lives at medicinal fairs, believing that all they needed was a little nip of liquid gold? As riddles go, the Tudor period certainly held its share of quirky contests. Yet for every hearty laugh shared, there was always a not-so-noble underneath, sifting through secret jugs while upping the ante on the next zealous participant. Urine trials, tales to last through generations, where the glory of triumph must have surely matched the number of tragic tales that emerged through laughter, camaraderie, and frankly, a wicked sense of folly that nobody signed up for in the first place. So, as you settle back into the comforting embrace of modern medicine, it is easy to thank our ancestors for their resilience. They fumbled through this light and liquid legacy. Drink up, take a swig, and raise the bar to the hilarity and horror that once ruled Tudor health. Who knew that urine could hold the key to such unfathomable comedy that remains strangely relevant even today? Don your best Tudor attire and prepare for an evening with your friendly neighbourhood pea phenoms. In these halls, majestic organ music echoes beautifully while wand-wielding potty practitioners tempt uninformed guests with a splash from urine-themed potions. Would you join the ranks of sippers at this pea-powered gala? Imagine the scene, chandeliers twinkling above, their candles flickering hazily as candle wax drips down in all the wrong places. Socialites clad in their finest wool tunics are mingling, discussing the latest fads in urine. Yes, urine. Is it fresh? Is it fermented? And how much humour can one really draw from the colour? The main attraction of the evening is the tasting chamber, where row after row of elaborately decorated jars are filled with yellowish elixirs. These aren't just any concoctions. They are specially brewed blends concocted with the utmost care, and possibly a lack of concern for hygiene. Ladies and gentlemen excitedly clutch goblets as they contemplate each choice, desperately trying to discern which potion might cure their ailments, or at least give them a laugh for the night. "Is that lavender I smell?" one inquisitive patron might inquire while cautiously tasting an amber brew labelled fit for a king. And as the rest of the crowd eagerly watches, he grimaces as it tastes like something straight from an unwashed bucket. Next to the tasting table, an enthusiastic medic stands holding a horn, intending to augment his voice sufficiently above the jubilant crowd. He's the evening's chief entertainer, and his job is to promote the magical benefits of urine over dinner. With theatrical flair, he describes how a drop of today's selection can enhance virility, protect against illness, and cure just about every imaginable ailment. "Drink up," he encourages, raising his own goblet high. "For tonight we drink like kings. Who else here has a touch of the consumption?" A hearty laughter erupts as a few patrons enthusiastically shout their symptoms, of indigestion after last week's feast, of a cough that won't go, or the strains of a long day in the fields. As the revellers sip from little goblets, you can't help but wonder what new recipes have been developed by these imaginative souls. Perhaps one of those passionate apprentices who roams the halls has taken the cue to mix urine with honey, or even poppy seeds, trying to create a gourmet cure. Who knew that instead of a sweet tea party, Today we dine among bottle pails of liquid sunshine. Meanwhile, a nearby article, Secrets from the Pot, reveals that urine has a long-standing history as a potion ingredient, dating all the way back to the Romans, regal potions, and even the mythical practices of medieval times. Curiously, the evening lingers on the remarkable fluid of past eras, where being a jester was oftentimes preferred. The jester waiters, clad in brightly coloured tattered garments complete with bells, flit about with trays of beverages, with a special mention of the royal urine remedy brew in every set. Patrons can't help but snicker as they delight not only in the potency of their drinks, but also in the jokes and jests hurled amidst conversations. Why did the royalty drink their pee? Because it was liquid gold! Get it? Sparkles of laughter waft throughout the hall, punctuating misty conversations among guests as foodmeisters serve absurd delicacies, considering the odd culinary tastes of the time. As plates filled with hard bread and questionable cheeses circulate, guests can hardly ignore the musky aroma floating throughout the hall. It's a mingled scent of disappointment, daring, and of course, urine. But hey, who needs scented candles when you can keep it real? At the table nearest the organ, a plucky young woman decides to challenge herself. "I'll drink the golden delight if you dare," she proclaims, daring her friends to match her audacity. With laughter echoing, she downs the concoction, as flurries of applause rain down, leading to people shouting variations. "A toast to peasants gone wild!" The evening winds down with everyone high-fiving each other and creating new songs about the urine-based remedies, birthed from ridiculous antics and friendly rabble. We've turned Urolania into an art form. One resounding cheer bounces through the crowd, reminding us all how important such unorthodox gatherings are, even if the urine didn't quite help cure the common cold. So, in this hilariously demented setting, we celebrate the quirks of Tudor life, acknowledging that their rollercoaster of pee-centric therapy might have missed the mark. But let's raise a glass, for the enchantment of laughter remains a universal cure, even in the peeing halls of history. Comedic contradictions of the past lead us to jest as the magical charms from Tudor pleasure seekers sought to lay waste behind spirit-filled brews. How people actually pranced into holding their noses at awkward tales of urine therapies stood as a testament to imagination without bounds. Picture the bustling tavern, where patrons gathered under flickering candlelight to swap tales of their latest medical escapades. "You'll never believe how my cousin Gerald cured his gout. He drank a pint of his own pee," they'd proclaim with laughter barely stifled by their mugs of ale. Who needed physicians when you had a crowd of rowdy friends eager to share their anecdotal encounters with their own bodily fluids? It was truly a time when the absurd ruled the day, where jingles about urine emerged like folk songs sung by jovial minstrels. "Here's to the golden stream, the nature's tonic, the night's esteemed," rang out jubilantly as mugs clinked in jovial agreement. If you wondered back then why the village drank so heartily, you'd soon find that every sip came laden with the unshakable assurance that consuming pee was a rite of passage into the world of not just health, but hilarity. Picture the gentle humiliation when a bard with a merry jig began to sing of his intimate knowledge of urine-based remedies. It was the only business arrangement to never be boring. And while it may sound unsanitary by today's standards, Tudor folk were all in for a little bit of fun. Well, at the expense of their well-being. Imagine a group of merry men gathered around the hearth, their tales of miraculous healing resonating like honour among thieves. "Ah, but did you hear of Farmer Bill?" one would chime in, eyes twinkling with glee. "He swore by it, swore. I caught him trying to bribe a whole field of turnips with the stuff." The laughter would spill across the smoky tavern air, making any half-eaten loaf of damp rye feel like a gourmet treat. and each fabricated anecdote only fanned the flames of their joviality. But alas, the truth behind these whimsical tales was murkier than the potion itself. The humorous facade cloaked a population that often had no other remedies to fall back on, especially when it came to the raging plague sweeping through villages. It forced many to take a sip of their own liquid salvation with an unbridled fervour, convinced that some magical chicken broth concocted from golden nectar would save them from the grips of death. Ironically, as laughter echoed through the stone-walled reserves of tavern life, so too did the whispered words of those who wondered if such rituals were more farcical than factual. In a peculiar turn of events, it was common knowledge that celebratory breaches of health often took place in the very heart of a tavern, not in the sterile confines of a doctor's chamber. Many esteemed physicians wouldn't even think of attending the ailments of a lowly peasant. That job would naturally fall to the local witch, the mirthful mystic, equipped with bottles of herbs, potions, and possibly a vial of her own urine. Townsfolk would journey from afar, hoping the mystical hag might concoct some charm to relieve a nasty cough or cleanse them of the bad air ruining their lives. And just when you thought it couldn't get sillier, lost messages between the healer and the sick would often give rise to the silliest situations. "Ava, I told you not to drink from the cauldron, but into it!" They'd bicker, the warrior-styled ruckus gaining heights of hilarity through their misunderstandings of these magical brews. In the folklore of village life, the creation and documentation of pea-related remedies birthed a curious tapestry of humour, sometimes sprinkled with actual truth, but mostly thriving on the playful imagination of the people. Of course, not every cure made it through the ages as a noble legacy. The hilarious history of urine reached its climactic banter at a town festival, with jesters parading around cartfuls of homemade craft brews touted as medieval magic pints. The warm cup of liquid gold turned sour, figuratively and literally, as people debated the authenticity of the contents, leading many to contemplate what else could have made that magical potion come to life. So the next time you crack a grin at some medieval whimsy, remember the humour that came from something as ordinary and ridiculous as urine. It kept societies thriving through laughter and chaos, long before modern medicine whisked medical professionals into existence, taking with it the art of the comical urinary remedy traditions that flourished in taverns. Perhaps, lurking somewhere between the serious and the absurd, there's a lesson to be learned. If there is, it's certainly ripe for exploration and even greater silliness. After all, in Tudor England, laughter was the best medicine at any hour, especially after a golden toast to medicinal powers no one quite understood. It hits hard when truth collides with a royal flush. Kings and queens disregarded their royal decorum for a liquid treasure that only they believed remained health-enhancing. Who knew an aristocrat could be so misled, frolicking around cups overflowing with a yellow tint? Life in a castle was a delicate dance of etiquette, grandeur, and a healthy dose of misinformation, particularly when it came to medicine. The royal court was the venue for lavish banquets that would leave even the most seasoned food critics scratching their heads. Yet, amidst the splendid feasts and dazzling gowns, the real spectacle was often found in the healer's corner, especially when those healers were more witch doctors than scientists. Picture it, the grand hall where the champagne flutes sparkled under the flickering torchlight and the nobles gathered for their evening repast. As plates of roasted peacock and pies, stuffed with every available fruit imaginable, filled the table, doctors in tailored robes laid claim to the honour of prescribing the good stuff to help with respiratory issues, rashes, and even mild headaches. And their trusty sidekicks, a series of bubbling flagons labelled urine tonic. Yes, What medieval wine cellar wouldn't have its charm of yellow-hued brews awaiting discerning royal lips? Yet, even the most robust stomach could only handle so much dodgy decision-making. Picture a fasting prince, feeling ill or, heaven forbid, under the weather, parading boldly into the medicinal den. Here, he finds a bevy of colourful jars, each filled with layers of amber liquids, purportedly administered by his personal alchemist, who was nothing short of a medieval barista. "Ah, your highness, or should I say your urinal," the physician would offer, spooning some liquid gold into a goblet with a flourish. Impressive, yes, until the poor royal, after one too many sips, goes running back and forth like a court jester trying to juggle beans, wishing he'd simply tried that sketchy leftover beef stew instead. However, not every noble downed the yellow elixir without a second thought. Rumour has it that Queen Elizabeth I, notorious for her wit and sharp tongue, often sidestepped these remedies while continually livid at her physicians. Properly horrified at what might be asked of those left to follow her, she never hesitated to snap her fingers in irritation at their persistently goofy recommendations. "Certainly," she'd scoff. "I'd rather run the risk of plague than mix my Earl Grey with the nectar of life, thank you very much." While peasants across the land may have laughed in their humble abodes, toasting over hearty pots of soup and the occasional ale for their ailments, the nobility revelled in more profound rituals than they could muster. The fantasy of the royal flush reigned supreme, crafted and sipped with the utmost disdain. Conversations about today's remedy revolved around exotic herbs, thoughts of healing, vibrations, and, quite audibly, a fragrant waft of something that might have once been alive. Clearly the royals were putty in the hands of dubious healers, their collective trust occasionally eclipsing any semblance of sanity. Now, before you think that this trend was exclusive to England's castles, let's take a peek across the Channel. French nobles might have added another layer of humour on this already amusing scenario. "Merely a glass of urine, dear," they'd proclaim while shoving you a smirk the size of the Seine, hoping the latest tonic would inspire tales of prolonged beauty or great strength, both of which would soon leave them reeling. Surely chic Parisian salons couldn't be far behind, hosting evening receptions where pee was the toast of the town. While they were likely too refined to express it, the sly whispers of "piss anyone" would reverberate through the age, securing a royal position for urine that was far more regal than anyone could have imagined. The irony lies in the realization that societies once fawned over their wonders without so much as the faintest consideration that bodily substances could often suggest a level of suffering. As tinctures darkened by some herbal plants began to evolve past the urinal's fine wall art, the regal class would eventually catch on, turning their deep admiration toward opulent perfumes instead. After all, who could resist the allure of a carefully crafted fragrance rather than the pungent memory of liquid gold? So, as the powdery whispers of old arrivals continue to float through history, let's reflect on the hilariously misguided treatments of the past. Royalty indulged in a wee bit of poison, mistaking it for a miracle. At times, medicine was merely the looming shadow of latter-day malpractice. But hey, the laughter was endless. In the age of peeology, one question remains perplexing. When will society ever learn that health and simple decorum should be considered as different as apples and absurdly unruly oranges? Amidst the sounds of hooting, tutting and bubbling, urine rained Guyve into the chaos. What passed off as friendly pastime rapidly turned quirky with strip card games. Ladies and gentlemen explored who could stomach it best, and by the end of the sessions, pee jokes bubbled heartily. In Tudor England, social gatherings in bathhouses weren't merely opportunities for cleanliness. They became an amusing swirl of competitive hilarity, where the golden game took centre stage amidst fragrant barrels of questionable brews and fellow gentry gasping for their next gulp. Picture this scene. Heavy wooden tables pushed together in a steamy chamber filled with laughter, friendly rivalries, and the ever-present scent of damp wool and, well, urine. Participants gathered in their robes, possibly draped more flamboyantly than they'd ever dare on the streets. The stakes for these casual games fluctuated from silly forfeit rituals, like balancing a jug of water on your head while reciting poetry, to less regrettable bets. Who could endure the strongest ale without a single wince? But the highlight was definitely the urine contemplation game, a wild version of Spin the Bottle, where the bottle would prove whether you could guess the owner of the chosen liquid sample accurately. It's hard to think of a better way to prove your social standing. Now, with the air thick from an alluring mix of flowered incenses and the more pervasive, distinct aroma of humanity, these jokesters would strap themselves foolishly into their bets. "Let's see how brave you truly are," one entrepreneur would shout, while another would raise a cup of urine-laden challenge. A vile concoction resembling a mishmash of rainwater and the depth of a muddy puddle sat ready for someone deemed courageous enough to take a sip. The crowd would draw nearer, eyebrows raised, gasps prepped for encouragement or outright judgment. Who knew which way this frothy concoction might result? With ill-intent amusement crackling in the air, a whim of glory hovered, ready to nail the victor with an embarrassing consequence. Or perhaps the crowd would drag the guaranteed loser to its laurels. And speaking of consequences, picture the sheer joy of the gentry as they roasted each other while balancing their proclivity for certain outhouse dramas. Over stifling laughter you'd hear one nobleman proclaim, "What's the worst fear? The plague or a bladder infection?" Such banter became an art, followed by blistering humour that thrived like wildflowers in the shadow of the untamed laughter. Yes, friends, witty repartees strode through the bathhouse like peacocks. "Make way for Sir Urine of Bath," called another, fending off overly critical remarks like sword-fighting straw men. Hilarity reigned supreme as tales turned from noble engagements to the kind of whimsy fit for a troubadour, and thus the game crowned illustrious winners on dynamic turfs, fraught with laughter, passers-by, and peculiar quests. Famed jesters emerged, donning robes that were as vibrant as the concoctions floating in dishes akin to dubious bomb shots. Those who mastered the ritual of the golden cup strutted about, comforted by the fact that life, after all, had taken a surprisingly humorous yet pungent turn. It turned out that youth remains eternal when rooted in laughter. Lift your goblet high, and may the hand gestures fit your masterpiece of words. As the night wore on, ragged roars of laughter drowned out the stench wafting around the hall, where faux victories were punctuated by comically exaggerated bows. With each sip of bitter ale and each accidental swipe of pea jokes, the camaraderie grew deeper. Who wouldn't feel vigour when rounded with fellow gentry giggling and engaged in their strange little world, embracing jocularity amidst the oddest of elixirs? Imagine raising your glass to your closest ally in the game, clutching urine-laden friends and justifying it as a cure, veering suddenly into parodic admiration of life. Ultimately, the bathhouses served as picturesque arenas, beacons of raucous enjoyment amid trivial grievances. This world, ever so chaotic with nuances between nobles, was the remnant of a time when joy lay within and around humanity, to indulge in pure silliness, even amidst the unlikeliest of liquids. So the next time you chuckle at an absurd game with your friends, remember the Tudor influencers playing games in their very own bathhouses, forever turning a golden tide of yellow into laughter echoing through time, reminding us of the surprisingly human blend of mirth and messiness. Ever seen a doctor in function mode? Mirth walked the streets during the pestilence years, as potions drew them together over giggles and acrobatics. The alchemy of urine and plague patterns oddly fit, because who needed to breathe when every cup filled with yellow held a simultaneous laugh? You see, in Tudor England, during the whirlwind of the plague, humour wasn't just a salve, it was a necessary survival mechanism as doctors, with their colourful robes and even more colourful theories, went about making the best of a truly grim situation. Imagine strolling through bustling streets, where the sweet stench of unkempt hygiene mingled with the faint whiff of urine, as remedies were potent enough to make even the most seasoned drinker question their life choices. A doctor with a twisted sense of fun might postulate that, when coming down with a nasty cough, drinking someone else's liquid gold would definitely cure it. And there you would be, watching as townsfolk exchanged hearty guffaws while holding up their cups like the finest chalices of mead, all the while convincing themselves they were conveniently warding off the plague. And while we modern folks often grumble about our morning coffee or cringe at our pre-workout smoothies, imagine downing your daily dose of urine elixir with a side of "if you don't laugh, you'll cry." Plague doctors, with their beaked masks stuffed with herbs, were the true entertainers of the epidemic. Picture them prancing down the cobbled streets like strange comedic bards, yelling about how the humours must be balanced, while flinging around colourful flasks of urine-based cures as if their lives depended on it. And maybe they did. Then, of course, you had the wonderfully bizarre ritual called the miasma theory, where the notion was that noxious air full of bad humour was the true vector for disease. Still, no one had the heart to tell doctors that when you're dressed to the nines in black cloaks, while strutting about with a mask like a pigeon, you may be contributing more to the noisy miasma than simply treating it. Instead, the unfortunate victims of the plague were mentioned at the doctors' performances like some tragic comedy, with urine often being handed out as the audience, the afflicted town's kids at the very least, clutched their sides in disbelief. Speaking of bodily fluids, let's address the elephant in the room. Urine was treated like liquid gold for a reason. People consumed it not just for laughs, but sincerely believed it held magical properties. It was considered effective against everything from surging plagues to popping pimples. If you were feeling particularly mischievous, you could always swap your chamomile tea for a urine cordial. And why not? It was guaranteed to surprise your taste buds while keeping the deception just gallant enough to elicit an unexpected belly laugh. But amidst the hilarity, there's a bittersweet undertone. While folk were swigging their yellow brews, there were grave matters at hand. The pestilence crept through towns with a solemnity that turned farces into tragedies. The pall of disease loomed, but it was this juxtaposition of life and death that gave rise to a resilient, gallant spirit. A spirit fortified, oddly enough, by urine. Celebrating the absurdity turned townspeople into camaraderie-bearing warriors, dressed in articles of questionable hygiene, much like a modern-day festival of bright colours and confusion. Amidst the chaos, gallows humour became the order of the day. Candle-lit taverns overflowed with attention-seeking performers, enthusiastically cracking jokes about the next town. Last I heard, half of them signed up for the next level of pea cure, and 2 rises in 1 pot for all. They cheered on misfortune like it was some gilded game of chance, sticking to humour as their guiding light while warding off any real dread. So you see, dear listener, while we might look back and chuckle at the past's unrefined remedies and peculiar beliefs, the laughter rising amid despair speaks volumes about humanity's unyielding resilience. The Tudor folk didn't just drink pee or call themselves peasants. They were full of life, defying every plague with laughter, making sport of their ailments, and reminding us all that even in our darkest times, A splash of humour and a dollop of camaraderie can make the most repulsive of liquids taste just a little sweeter. Together they transform those moments into the finest pot of tragicomic gold, the alchemical marvel that is the human experience. So here's to our ancestors, who laughed off their fears of dying from the Black Death while swigging their urine-laden concoctions in dimly lit taverns, simply embracing the absurdity one cup at a time. Doesn't that put your typical Monday morning coffee run into perspective? It's a wee bit eerie to philosophise about the lingering effects of urine in myths of the afterlife. Past samples found their way into last rites, spellbinding those too sick to laugh, as hysterical laughter turned to solemn reflection. How's that for a mystical end? Picture this. The scene unfolds in a dimly lit medieval chamber, where a makeshift altar made from repurposed barnwood becomes the sacred space for the final send-off. A priest clad in a robe that hasn't seen soap since last Christmas solemnly verses over the deceased, accompanied by a choir of stifled giggles from nosy neighbours who can't help but share inside jokes about the quality of today's holy hydration. Urine wasn't merely a bodily fluid to the Tudors, it was a sign of humanity's enduring nature, especially when the Grim Reaper started knocking. When someone shuffled off this mortal coil, friends and family gathered not only to mourn but to conduct a very peculiar ritual, a consultation with the late individual's liquid legacy. Forget flowers or scented candles. Some believed that a splash of the deceased's last golden drop could bless them and usher their spirit into the afterlife, much like a really aggressive high five. "Guard your kidneys," you might hear a jester shout in jest, as someone doles out the pee infusion meant to take the deceased even further into the afterlife. Surprise. It's pee, the ultimate potion meant to guide you to paradise, making a solid case for why not everyone's old Aunt Dot made it past the pearly gates, especially after her last sip. Of course, some enterprising souls fabricated stories around this ritual. Maybe it was to boost business or simply keep up the community spirits, but the little truth known was that many believed you could cure the sick by sampling the latest urine flavour. You know, just a slight measure of what's Granny's got going on today. Those aromas permeating the air were merely a trial of the local alchemist's hilarious sense of humour. Now consider how this liquid gold played a role in those hotly contested debates about healing. Prayers were said, awkward offers exchanged, all revolving around the bizarre idea that urine could lay out the bounds of fate. Like a fortune teller with an excellent sense of decorum. Ah, but it's only natural, pee cures all. Yes, coming from the mouths of the medieval medically inclined, it was a phenomenon fabled more than just a desperate cry for solutions. Funeral rites evolved around this peculiar practice, turning mundane goodbyes into sprawling pea-themed send-offs. As casks were rolled in like portable privies parading for one last showtime, local mourners reminisced while cautiously navigating the realm of the mystic yellow. It'd be safe to assume these gatherings were as festive as they got, with giggles and party songs thrown into the mix as urine became an honorific gesture, not just a bodily exit. Beyond the tears and laughter, many started to conclude that urine's parting gift helped cast them through spiritual waters, bringing about a light as they fused humour with their destiny. However, this blend of bowel humour combined with kicking the bucket didn't always paint a comforting picture, and yet somehow, amid these golden celebrations, a deeply earnest hope emerged, of life after life, where urine could transcend. The notion of representing strength and survival during trials still tickled the funny bones of those witnessing the ceremonies. Mourners left feeling not just grim but honoured, having collectively peeled away the iron grasp of dread, finding solace in the absurdity. In a world then where pathogens ran rampant and medicine resembled dark arts, More than hygienic human practices, the embrace of humour surrounded what was surely far more morose than golden. So, while today we might laugh about the pea-filled potions our ancestors swore on, let's take a moment to praise the underlying irony. Behind grand ceremonies and solemn prayers lay a universe of laughter rooted in humanity, the unending longing for connection and understanding, even as we approach a farewell. So the next time you find yourself at a gathering, perhaps your own league of drinkers or woefully intoxicated, remember the humour from those grim moments of the past. Much like those medieval souls, we too can find joy even in absurd rituals, be it with cocktails or simply doing our best to connect, one laugh at a time. Cheers! Or should I say, guard your kidneys. Join the open mic night of the Tudor period, where ancient musicians create melodies dedicated to, yep, you guessed it, everything pea-related. Make merry as you croon alongside an innkeeper with angstily chosen instruments. We truly do live in marvellous times. Picture a raucous tavern filled with the scents of stale ale, overcooked meat, and an ever-present undertone of humanity's natural essence. As the sun sets behind thatch-roofed cottages, the sounds of strumming lutes and merry pipes fill the air, beckoning you to join in a chorus that could only be described as medieval genius. Do you want to hear a song about urine, you might ask, perhaps not expecting to actually get one? Why, of course, they would respond almost too eagerly. Urinals were not just places for relieving oneself, they were places of inspiration. Imagine a roguish bard taking the stage dressed in layers of motley fabric that surely hadn't been washed since the last plague scare. With a twinkle in his eye and a cup of weak ale in his hand, he strums his lute and launches into a ballad extolling the virtues of golden nectar. The lyrics are witty and absurd, with just a hint of the grim reality that accompanied illness during the Tudor age. As he sings about the miraculous healing properties of various pea potions, some dark and mysterious, others light and frothy, local inngoers laugh heartily. If your skin's a shade of yellow, don't you fret, a splash of the good stuff is your best bet, he croons, raising his mug, encouraging everyone to raise their cups in an ironic toast. The crowd roars with laughter, sloshing their drinks, all while forgetting they aren't just celebrating a quirky tune, but rather a very real answer to many of their ailments. In this atmosphere, there's a delicate balance between jest and genuine hope. You chuckle as ragged folk peasant ladies join in, harmonising off-key as they sway to the rhythm of the song, shaking their tambourines like their long-buried dreams of an organised health system are finally being put to the forefront. You can almost hear one of them whisper, "You know, I did feel a bit better after trying that urine therapy last week." And indeed, the ballads serve as an assurance. If the multitude of awful maladies afflicting them could be reduced to a catchy tune, perhaps the remedies could work just as well. Immersed in laughter and quirky cultural rituals, one only hopes the poet understands golden showers in both meanings. As the evening wears on, the innkeeper jumps onto the makeshift stage, eager to add another verse. Chewing through the lines about urine puddles, he belts, "What may drown you in shame, well friends, is another man's game. Drink deep from the cup of life. It brings healing for the strife." The crowd erupts in silly cheers while you ponder, how did they manage to make urine sound so poetic? For these merry folk, life itself is just as unpredictable as their health care system. There, between the howls of laughter at lyrics glorifying pea and the strains of medieval, waiting for a miracle cure to be delivered in a bottle, you feel that this evening together is more than a passing oddity. It's a window into how they coped with their world. Their magic did not merely lie in fantasies of valour and valour. It found a home in downright uncomfortable truths. The folk songs remind them they are together in their struggles, songs rising above the despair of their medieval existence. As the night draws to a close, the bard strums a final triumphant chord. "Raise your glasses, let's drink to our timid bladders and brave hearts," he declares. Uneasy laughter mingles with hearty applause as you realise just how crucial these little moments are. As the group disperses, you can't help but wonder if, amid their goofy charm and toilet humour, they understand the bitter irony. Their life was defined by survival, and perhaps a little urine-inspired revelry was just the jovial distraction they needed from the tougher realities lurking not far from their raucous dinner tables. Remember, whether it's a poorly sung tune about what to do when the plague hits or a riotous evening dedicated to the most peculiar of remedies, there is a lasting power in such peculiar forms of expression. Who knew that something as essential as urine could bring laughter, unity and resilience to an otherwise bleak Tudor existence? As the last notes fade, you note that somehow this revelry, filled with liquid gold, taught the most important lesson of all. Laughter can be the best medicine, even when your doctor is not quite right in the head. The strangest imbalance turned dust bunnies tumble when Yorkshire's knitting squad chose to peep through the bottle for horoscopes. Often braving flora at their craft, this crew made art designs about urine's great grip to emblazon a quickly dwindling audience's entertainment. Now, these weren't your average knitters cooking up cosy sweaters for the winter. No, this merry band of women proclaim themselves to be artists and herbalists extraordinaire, convinced that the insights derived from someone's urine could predict the future. Forget tarot cards and crystal balls. Who needed them when you had a golden cup of fate juice on hand? As their debating sessions rolled on, hilarity often ensued. Picture it. A handful of ladies gathered in a dimly lit cottage, needlework bouncing off the walls, while they ogle through yellowed samples like modern tarot readings. What do we see, one would muse, peering into a jar with the same seriousness as a raven-haired prophet deciphering runes? Ah, a cloudy complexion. Could mean a bad summer for greens, or perhaps Doris from the village has finally lost her marbles again. Their art involved knitting pea-themed designs, a tapestry that blended lush greens with unfortunate splashes of yellow, each stitch infused with the mystical knowledge of liquid futures. They promoted these creations as urine-inspired works, wearing them proudly at village fairs while confusing onlookers. Those attending would be torn between wanting to laugh and fearing the possibility of urine-infused divination circulating around the market. Picture your local fishmonger eyeing one woman's cardigan featuring a pattern that suspiciously resembled splattered pottage. Is that urine on display?" he'd mutter, desperately hoping he's just hallucinating from the day's catch. But the knitting squad's gambles didn't end with textile visions. When it came time for readings, the stakes rose dramatically. Here's how it worked. On certain Thursdays, each member brought a vial of their spiritual essence, that's code for urine, to be analysed for reading. They'd giggle like schoolgirls as they compared colours and fragrances. "Betsy, it smells like you've been feasting on pickled herrings again," another chuckled, snickering as she held up a sample that could only be described as the olfactory equivalent of a hayfield. If enough participants felt lucky enough, they would wager on their predictions, placing their own specially knit pea-themed garments, let's call them pea suits, on the line. Whoever predicted correctly got the delight of draping themselves in their opponent's urine art, reaffirming the age-old truism that fortune favours those who are slightly bonkers. Ever the innovators, one enthusiastic member tried a hand at urine dyeing. Yes, this was not about targeting bad cases of thriftiness. Instead, it involved using urine to enhance fabric colours. Some days, sweat and scepticism filled the air as they awaited the transformation of these dubious dye pots. "This shade is truly medieval mustard. A new trend," she'd proclaim with pride, churning through the mixtures like a mad scientist. The vision of women parading around in pea-dyed creations became legendary, even if it did raise a few eyebrows and noses. Word soon spread beyond Yorkshire, and what began as neighbourhood hilarity formed a loosely organised cultural phenomenon, one infusing laughter into those quieter Tudor times. Peep shows they called themselves. There were no horizons too far away. Could this be the future of fashion? Surely not. Their popularity saw a rise among villagers, each eager to hear what fate had brewed for them as they sported their knitted urine regalia proudly. The convoluted decorations worked like hotcakes, warming even the coldest hearts in these trying times. Soon the knitting squad found themselves in a tussle with opposing groups touting more conventional remedies. Who needs herbalists when you can knit your way to enlightenment? Some might scoff. Yet, for every naysayer shouting from their puritanical pedestal, the ladies responded with raucous laughter and an invitation to join the Golden Fellowship. As the trends bubbled and burped, from dyeing sessions to comedy readings, something profound twisted through their threads. They spun a unique community focused on friendship, fun, and the uncanny. A peculiar yet momentous reminder of the artful ways humans cope with the absurdity of life. And while urine might not have been the healing panacea they swore by, the bonds they forged and laughter shared proved a powerful elixir of their own. Who knew that Yorkshire's knitting squad would become purveyors of hilarity packaged in pea? Truly magical. So when you think back to Tudor history, spare a thought for those unforgiving ladies. They turned a biological necessity into community-crafted art, daring to laugh amidst a world that often took itself far too seriously. And thus, peeking through a bottle could bring more than mere predictions. It laid the groundwork for joy, togetherness, and surprisingly stylish pea-themed fashion statements, woven through time. Bid adieu to the quizzical experience of urine therapies as we fondly remember the eccentricities of Tudor health trends. Here's to all the brave souls who used liquid gold to bring warmth on chilly evenings, and who kept pea-centric lives amusing and memorable. It's a fascinating thought, really. What could possibly inspire someone to take medical advice from a time when pea therapy wasn't just a joke, but a legitimate source of health regimens? Imagine being told by your family physician, swathed in robes that haven't seen a wash since the last great frost, that your miracle cure lies in a vessel of your own making. You'd nod solemnly, wondering if they'd confused diagnosis with dare. You've certainly heard of the infamous golden showers, but they weren't quite the steamy surprises we think of today. No, they were more akin to medieval potions brewed with a confidence you can't help but admire, like trying to brew coffee from a cactus and hoping for a morning pick-me-up. Tudor medical practitioners were like stand-up comedians without the stage. "What ails you, fine sir?" "Ah, it's a simple case of the drizzles." Try this. A pint of freshly squeezed mead mixed with a splash of the golden tonic from your own pipes. Guaranteed it won't be the first time you needed a personal touch. Among the Tudor folk, it was wildly believed that urine exhibited unique healing properties, like how a toddler swears their invisible friend can heal the sick. A doctor might glance over a pea sample with the gravitas of a connoisseur examining a fine wine. Notes of hearty carrots and a hint of asparagus. "This takes me back to 62, he'd declare, a twinkle in his eye. While a contemporary doctor might raise an eyebrow at such assessments, because who wants to commit to tasteless banter over yellow specimens? To them, it was a cheery pastime that added some calorie-free flavour to their day. It's ironic to think about modern medical practices borrowing from the past that involved analysing fluid dynamics. not exactly the physics lesson you wished for in health class. Imagine finding yourself in a Tudor medical ward, surrounded by scrolls lined with remedies you wouldn't dare consider for yourself. Acid reflux? Easy. Simply drink your fill of warm urine mixed with nettles and whole roots, followed by a treat of boiled goat feet. It's like the original urban legend, only the punchline never lands because the joke could actually involve a hefty checkup. But let's hand it to the Tudors. They may have gotten stuck in their golden era, but they had quite the flair for the dramatic. Dust off your imagination for a moment and picture a Tudor lady delicately sipping her elixir at an opulent dinner party, looking far too regal for what's actually on the menu. "Oh, darling, what's in your refreshing drink?" someone would ask, the veneer of civility strained as she replied, "We suddenly appeared right after dinner, and who knew liquid gold had such robust flavour? If that's not commitment, I don't know what is." And while we've certainly advanced in our understanding of medicine, thank heavens for that, there's something wonderfully ludicrous about looking back at an era that truly embraced the absurd in the name of health. As we cosy up in our modern homes with reliable medical options, let's grant a gentle nod to those who bravely consumed their living elixirs, filled with more potty humour than the average soap opera. In retrospect, their notorious belief in urine as a healing tonic was a charming, albeit bizarre, expression of human creativity in the name of wellness. We might giggle today, but it served to remind us that there will always be desperate measures in times of need. After all, whether it be pee or a magic mushrooms, what's history without a bit of wild youthful abandon? So let's raise our imaginary glasses, dear friends. Here's to Tudor medicine and its liquid gold, the brave souls who laid the groundwork for audacity, ingenuity, and a reckoning of what constitutes healing. From ports of humour to rivers of ridiculousness, may your healthcare choices forever remain minimally invasive and tastelessly simple. And let's leave the golden nectar in medieval times, where it rightly belongs, like a proud relic of a royal folly. At long last we reflect upon our journey through this odyssey of absurdity. As we see, many believed urine could cure anything, and yet the laughter and lessons from the past remain timeless. But perhaps we'll keep the bathroom jokes to ourselves for a bit longer. After all, while our ancestors may have sipped on what they considered potions of paradise, we now know to reach for a bottle of vitamin C instead of that frothy glass of liquid gold. Though it might be tempting to imagine Tudor physicians tossing back their tiny glasses in toasts of a glad future, the truth is that they were seriously committed to their peculiar craft. Poets could only dream of such ballads of medicinal hilarity. Now let's ponder a moment about the serious side of these ridiculous remedies. Urine therapy shed light on the historical insistence of nature's role in health practices, a level of commitment that would make anyone who's ever attempted a juice cleanse wince in recognition. Folks were quite literally willing to bear the brunt of self-medication that, while cringeworthy now, was a testament to the humanity's deep urge to find healing in the most curious of places. Yet the human experience, it seems, has always drawn us back to laughter. Laughter is the salve that heals the awkwardness of a medieval doctor's office. But just as urine sat at the centre of these Tudor elixirs, so did the humour that arose around it. Imagine the conversations at the tavern, where patrons clinked their mugs of ale, swapping tales of their doctor visits like tall tales spun about some mythical creature. "Did you hear about the bloke who drank his own pee to cure the plague? I reckon he ran faster than a deer right after." It's cheeky remarks like these that remind us that humour is an essential coping mechanism, allowing us to tackle the very real absurdities of life, and perhaps also a means of preserving sanity in times of crisis. In those crowded, smoky halls, amid the laughter and jest, the parallels of the human experience emerged, our collective inclination towards folly. We may drink filtered water, pop probiotics, and have a plethora of health sources at our fingertips, but we continue to hold a mirror to our past in ways that seem strangely familiar. How many of us have avoided a doctor's examination simply because we feared what might come next? The dread of discussing our ailments, much like that Tudor patient bracing for a flickering candlelight diagnosis, mirrors our own hesitation before entering a sterile room filled with lab coats. Being human means also acknowledging the comic in our plight. It's a timeless tale wrapped neatly in humour and necessity. You might ask, what of the wisdom and lessons we glean from our predecessors? For one, the ingenuity so significant during Tudor times showcases creativity and resourcefulness. Disregarding the yellow-tinged medicinal failures, they found ways to imbue laughter and conversation in what could only be described as a series of unfortunate bodily functions. Perhaps our takeaway isn't just the appreciation for modern medicine, but also for those illuminating moments of joy amid the unpleasantness. That's a splendid balance of history, togetherness, and a bit of unfiltered honesty wrapped in the absurd. So, can we raise our glasses once more to the bravery of our medieval forebears, who not only kept laughing in the face of health crises, but also continually sought new antidotes, even if the source was a bit too personal for our taste? Still, the human experience persists with humour at its core. Maybe, just maybe, it's a reflection of our resilience and ultimate pursuit of well-being. As we draw this hilarity-laden chapter closed, we can agree. Let's take all we've learned from those outdated remedies and hold them in reverence, paired with appreciation for the time-worn camaraderie proved through laughter. The sheer eccentricities of our ancestors remind us how far society has come, and in times of uncertainty, some literal yellowed reminiscence holds crucial value. Life's absurdities were doused in levity long before Netflix, and while we may let some jokes slide, it's really all part of the wild ride of being human. Embrace the laughs, and remember, sometimes healing is simply about sharing tales over a pint, urine-free and full of cheer.